Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Daily Gwei Refuel, where we recap the latest news in the Ethereum ecosystem. I'm your host, Anthony Sassano, and today's the 22nd of November, 2022. Alright everyone, let's get into it. So some new news about the whole Genesis fiasco over the last 24 hours. So Frank Shapiro from The Block put a tweet out saying, sources tell The Block crypto trading firm Genesis, which has been struggling to raise emergency capital to shore up its lending unit's liquidity profile, has slashed its raise target from $1 billion to $500 million. As Bloomberg reported, it faces potential bankruptcy without funding. And then Frank follows his tweet up with a quote from Genesis, who says, "We have no plans to file bankruptcy imminently. Our goal is to resolve the current situation consensually without the need for any bankruptcy filing. Genesis continues to have constructive conversations with creditors." So yeah, I mean, like we're pretty much in the know now about kind of what the hole is for Genesis. It seems confirmed that there is at least a $500 million hole that they need to fill ASAP, and they're obviously trying to raise money to fill that. And they've also said themselves that they don't have plans to file for bankruptcy imminently, but that doesn't mean that it can't happen in the future. And I did say yesterday and maybe even last week that I figured that this would be unlikely because I think that Genesis would be able to raise the money that they need, maybe not $1 billion, but $500 million, it's doable, right? And not just raise it from outside investors, but also get the money from other DCG portfolio companies, which I think is realistic, to be honest. And obviously they'd rather not file for bankruptcy. They'd rather just fill this hole, learn from their mistakes, which it seems their mistakes are the same as everyone else's over the last 18 months, was that too much leverage, lending to the wrong people, getting wrecked on that daisy chain there, and basically shoring up their whole kind of balance sheet here. So to me, this is positive news, to be honest. Like, obviously, honestly, like, I wouldn't even say them filing for bankruptcy would be like the worst thing ever or be as bad as FTX. It would be nowhere near as bad as FTX or Terra or 3AC. I think it would obviously be another negative mark, but honestly, I think, as I mentioned yesterday, the market seems to be, I guess, pricing in a lot of this sort of stuff right now. That's why we're seeing such weak prices. But there are buyers. For every seller, there is a buyer. Now, it just means, how many buyers are at the margin here? How many buyers are actually not traders and are actually planning to hold it for longer than a few days or a week or something like that? That's the $1 billion question, right? But when it comes to Genesis, it seems they are trying really, really hard, much harder than FTX tried to shore up their balance sheet. And obviously with FTX, it was basically a very a fool's errand, right? Because the fact of the matter is that Genesis as a company is probably run a lot better than FTX. I mean, it's very hard to run a company as bad as FTX was run. So there are a lot of different things to consider here. And I know I keep seeing these threads about Grayscale, which is another DCG portfolio company, needing to dissolve the GBTC and ETH trusts in order to pay, to shore up their balance sheet here in order to fill this hole. I honestly don't think that's going to happen for so many different reasons, but like I saw a thread that someone saying that it's more likely that they're going to sell the BTC that's held by GBTC instead of being able to raise this $500 million on their own. That's just stupid to me. And they were saying that they would dissolve the whole trust because I think you have to dissolve the whole thing. I don't think you can just sell partial amounts of it. Maybe I'm wrong on that front. And I was thinking to myself, no, that thing's too much of a money machine. That would definitely put way too much pressure on the market, and the contagion from that would be massive because, as I've mentioned before, there's a shit ton of BTC in there. I think there's like 600,000 BTC in there. Now, imagine 600,000 BTC hitting the market, even if it's done over time, that would be a huge net negative here. And that would affect not just the wider market, but also DCG and all their portfolio companies and Genesis and everyone. So they're obviously going to avoid that as much as possible. And it might not even be possible to dissolve it because of this. I don't know the exact workings of the products themselves, but they are some of the most heavily regulated products in the world, those things. So it's not going to be just as easy as, we'll kind of shut the product down, take the BTC, sell it all in the market, and then use that money to shore up Genesis's balance sheet. I think that the more likely outcome is definitely them plugging this hole with outside investment. And honestly, 500 million in the scheme of things right now, in the grand scheme of the crypto ecosystem, is really not that much. I mean, CZ threw 500 million at Twitter, right? And I guess like doing that was probably not a great decision. I don't know. Like maybe it is long term, but to be honest, I don't think Twitter was worth what Elon paid for it. But that's a different discussion. So someone like CZ and a bunch of other I guess, big name people in the ecosystem could fill this hole. Like, I'm pretty confident in that. But that's not to say that there is a 0% chance of Genesis going bankrupt or filing for bankruptcy, and there's a 0% chance of the Grayscale products being dissolved, but I think there's a very low chance. I don't think this is like the FTX situation. It's just it seems to be the last bit of contagion that we just didn't know about. There is something about the Silvergate Bank, which handles a lot of crypto stuff. I haven't heard too much about that besides rumors. Like, I haven't been able to confirm stuff there, but I think it kind of feels like we're at the tail end of this contagion. And the funny thing is, this all started with Terra. Like, if you really map it all out, this started with Terra. It started with Terra, then went to 3AC, and then FTX, obviously. But FTX, I mean, had their own problems for a long time that they managed to hide. But in terms of this daisy chain of leverage, it really seems to have all spun out from Terra. And then once Terra collapsed, no one obviously wanted to show that they were in a really bad position, but if you were paying enough attention and you knew how these things played out and you knew there could be some deep contagion here, you probably saw this. And as I said, I feel like this is the tail end. As I've been saying over the past few weeks, can prices go lower? Of course they can. And they have been going lower, right? I mean, ETH is on the brink of going back to triple digits. Who knows if that's going to happen or not? Like, I've got no idea. But just based on sentiment, based on everything we've seen play out this year, based on the fact that when the new year ticks over, it tends to be pretty positive for crypto generally. I think that I don't know if now isn't the bottom or near the bottom, like, I don't know where is. Just that's how, and maybe all my intuitions are wrong here, but that's kind of what I'm feeling right now. And I take in a lot of inputs when looking at these sorts of things. I don't just look at something and be like, okay, well, this person's saying the bottom's in, so I'm going to believe them. I've learned over my years that literally no one ever really knows. They have relative confidence compared to other people. Obviously, someone new to this ecosystem is going to know a lot less than someone who's been around for a while, but no one knows for sure. And I think that should be obvious considering that we can't tell the future. But there are lots of inputs that you can take in, you can process them, you can add your own context to it, and you can give I guess, like a probability to each of the outcomes here, and then you can make a decision based on that. For me personally, I like, and unless you actually, well, I mean, it depends on the type of person you are. Unless you believe that the market's going to nuke 50% from here, I don't think the risk reward of waiting if you want to buy is worth it. And that's not investment advice, but that's just how I look at things, where I kind of look at ETH right now and I'm like, do I think ETH is going to $500-$600? I personally don't, but can it go there? Sure, right? But am I willing to take the risk of not buying the ETH that I want to buy now, wait for this mythical, $500-$600 ETH, and then it goes back to 2K and never goes down there? Like, that's the way I look at things. But I'm a long-term investor. I'm obviously very biased as well because I'm very bullish on Ethereum and ETH, and I'm bullish over a longer period of time, like 5, 10, 20 years sort of thing. I'm not doing this to be like, okay, well, I'll buy now and then in a year, ETH's going to be back at all-time high and I'll cash out then. No, and I you guys know I'm never selling my ETH anyway, but it's just the kind of way I look at it, where I'm like, I'm comfortable putting money in here. Now, as I said, that's not investment advice. Don't just listen to me. Just explain that listening to one person is never a good thing. Doesn't matter how legitimate they sound or seem or how much they make sense, but that's the way I'm looking at things. And there could always be another black swan that hits the market that we haven't considered, right? And then I think that the FTX insolvency was definitely a black swan that people hadn't considered again. And I remember having a conversation in Discord saying that I felt like the bottom that ETH had set in the triple digits was the bottom, unless we had another black swan-like event, which is what FTX was. And we still haven't gone back to triple digits. Who knows if that's going to happen or not. But yeah, as I talked about yesterday as well, it seems that a lot of the ecosystem has turned to apathy instead of fear right now. But there are pockets of fear. I think the only fear that I think is left is really fear of the what's true and what's not in the rumor mill, because there has been a rumor for pretty much every shitty scenario that you can imagine, and in the face of all that noise, it's very hard to get signal from that. And I remember a few months ago, people were talking about how Coinbase was insolvent, and no one was talking about FTX being insolvent or even a risk of them being insolvent. And obviously the people talking about Coinbase got it completely and utterly wrong. They're a publicly traded company. We can see the assets that they have, right? And they've been around for so long, and they've survived all this stuff, and they're fully regulated regulated in the US. There's so many different reasons why it's improbable for Coinbase to actually be insolvent at this point in time. And then no one was looking at FTX. No one was calling out FTX. There wasn't even rumors circulating about it, which is hilarious because people got it completely wrong. So when you're looking at all these rumors being spread, it's very hard to get any signal from that. So I default to just not believing any of them at face value, and then I pick some of them that seem more credible than others. The Genesis thing seems more credible to me than other things, and it seems to have played out because you can map that to something, right? You can map Genesis as a lending desk to the leverage blowout that we saw since Terra collapsed, and then you can say, well, it's more likely than not that Genesis had exposure here that they've been trying to cover for quite a while, but push comes to shove, it does become public, and it does kind of go out there, especially with the with the FTX collapse, which probably made it even worse, right? So yeah, to end there, I think is a good spot to end because, as I said, like lots of rumors flying around. Pick and choose which ones sound more credible than others. I know maybe that right now they all sound credible because of the fact that we've had some crazy stuff happen in crypto over the last year, I guess. But pick the ones that objectively sound as credible as possible and then do more research into those. Don't get bogged down in looking at every rumor or believing every rumor just because FTX blew up and no one saw that coming. It doesn't mean that every rumor is going to pan out to be true. Most of them won't pan out to be true. And honestly, I'm seeing a lot of Twitter accounts popping up on my feed that I have never seen before. Like quite literally never seen before. And I spend a lot of time on Twitter. I would have seen these accounts before. I've never seen them before. And they're talking about all this stuff. They're the ones spreading the rumors. And I look at that and I'm like, okay, like a part of me believes that these accounts have literally only been spun up to try and manipulate the market in order to get a better entry for some whale or something. I mean, you might think that sounds crazy or like a conspiracy theory, but I don't think it's too far-fetched. It costs nothing to set up a Twitter account. It costs nothing to put a thread together, especially in times of times like this where there's a lot of uncertainty, and get people to retweet you and pay attention to you, even if it's just a pure rumor, even if you have no sources at all. And we've seen it play out time and time again. So if you're a big money player and you want to move the markets or attempt to move the markets and you think that you can and get a better entry because you think we're near the bottom, but you want that last kind of, you want the market pushed down more, or maybe you want people to sell so that you have more liquidity to buy into as well. That's another side of it. Maybe you do that, right? Like as I said, like it's all about mapping something that seems probable to evidence that you can kind of corroborate with. And to me, I don't know, that seems obvious to me. And it happens in bull markets as well, not just bear markets. People will create fake accounts and create bots and talk about things as if they're better than what they are for exit liquidity, because big players need that liquidity. They can't just market sell or OTC sell a certain amount, especially of the more liquid stuff, not the BTC and ETH stuff, but a lot of the other tokens. They're very illiquid most of their life. They're only liquid or liquid enough for these big players during the ends of a bull market. So there's that side to it as well. But anyway, without going on about that stuff too much longer, I think we're going to have to just wait until maybe tomorrow or the day after to see what's happening with Genesis. I think there's a Wednesday deadline, and I believe that's US Wednesday, so we'll probably have to wait until I'll have to wait till Wednesday night for myself, not Wednesday morning, but maybe I'll be able to cover it on the refuel tomorrow. But yeah, going to leave that one at that. There's a bunch of other things to get through. So Ron Hammond has another great regulatory / politics thread out today about how Washington, D.C. is thinking about the FTX fallout. Now, I'm not going to read the thread out for you. It's not that long, but obviously too long to read on the refuel. I highly recommend giving it a read. The TLDR is basically that the D.C. is taking the FTX fallout very seriously. There's a lot of different discussions happening. SBF's original bill that he was backing is pretty much dead, but the DC, on both sides of the camp, Democrats and Republicans, both feel like the need to act because they're kind of asking questions like, how did this slip through the cracks? How did all these people that were supposed to be representatives in the US fall for this sorts of stuff and cozy up to SBF? So there's definitely a lot of eggs on faces right now, and that's being worked out as we speak. So you definitely go give this thread from Ron a read. I'll link it in the YouTube description below. All right, so Labris has an update out for Mevwatch.info today. So they've introduced the OFAC Censorship Offenders Leaderboard, a simple way to visualize the largest contributors to protocol-level censorship on Ethereum. So you can see here the leaderboard on the Mevwatch.info website. And it's currently ordered by total blocks that these entities are producing. And then on the right-hand side, you see the percentage of blocks that is engaging in censorship. So over the last day, for example, Lido has produced 2,328 of the blocks, which is more than a double or pretty much triple the second place, which is Coinbase. But they have censored 75% of those blocks, or at least applied the OFAC censorship to the 75% of the blocks. And then you can make your way down the list. You've got Coinbase, Kraken, Binance. They're all around the same. Coinbase is a little less at 68%. And then Stakefish, Rocket Pool, Staked US, blah, blah, blah. I'm just going to scroll down and see who the least offender is. Bitcoin Suisse is the least offender, and they're not the smallest staking entity either. So they're only censoring 7%, and they have 160 blocks that they produced today, which would, if sorted by blocks, put them in number 5 position. I think, or number six, if I'm just eyeing it here. I don't know if I can, no, I can't sort it there. And this data is being provided by rated.network, which is another website that I've highlighted to you guys. But I think this is great. I mean, obviously, it works as a way to socially shame the entities that are engaging in kind of mass censorship here and contributing to that higher level of censorship. But you guys know my opinion on this. I don't really think that this is something that the social layer can necessarily fix because the incentives are just too strong on the technical layer. As I've said before, MEV is the reason that this censorship is even happening, and we have to just fix that, which we are. We're working on that. Everything's happening on that side of things as well. But I do think this is valuable for people who care about this stuff deeply, right? Whether they be a solo staker or just putting their ETH into these staking providers, to go with the ones that aren't engaging in mass censorship here, which is kind of hard to pick from because even the ones that people love, even the decentralized ones like Rocket Pool, still 63% of blocks that Rocket Pool is producing are enforcing the OFAC sanctions. And this is because there is no, I guess, requirement to run a non-censoring relay. You can run whatever relay you want as part of any of these. And you can go to Raider.network and see this. I've shown this before on the Refuel, but basically if I load up the Raider.network website, you can see in the block space distribution here what it kind of looks like. So for Lido, they're using 70% Flashbots, but Flashbots isn't the only relay that's censoring. Block Native is also censoring, and that accounts for 4.7%. And you have, I believe, Eden is censoring as well. Let me have a quick look here. Eden Network is censoring, and Blocks Route Regulated. I don't think anyone's really using Blocks Route Regulated because they're using Blocks Route Max Profit, which is an uncensoring relay, and you can make your way down the list, and Flashbots dominates, and that's where it's coming from, right? That's where most of the censorship is coming from, Flashbots, and Bloxrat is second place, which is really nice to see, considering that most of their blocks are being produced by the Bloxrat Max Profit relay, which accounts for about 18.4% of all MEV boosted blocks, which is great. That's been growing over time, of course, and that's just over the last day, measured over the last day, of course. But yes, it's obvious that Flashbots still dominates here. But the reason why Bitcoin Suisse is not censoring very much is because they're not even using Flashbots here. They've got 91 or 91.9% vanilla blocks, and the blocks that they're doing through MEV Boost, they have Block Native at 1.7, Eden at 1.8, and Blockshroud at 4.6. So they don't seem to be using Flashbots at all, which is interesting. Whether they haven't enabled it or for some other reason remains to be seen, but that's the current kind of state of play there. So with the Mevwatch website as well, I wanted to share one thing. So I've been talking about how over time this OFAC compliance enforcement has been coming down over longer periods of time, and you can kind of see that here in the chart. The green obviously is non-OFAC compliant, the red is OFAC compliant, and then you can sort here. So over the last day, if you include all blocks, 72% have enforced OFAC compliance. We seem to have kind of topped out around here. But over the last 7 days, it goes to 75%. Last 30 days goes to 70%. So over longer periods of time, it definitely will fluctuate. And the main reason it fluctuates is because of the relayer profitability. So depending on whatever time it is, depending on the MEV that's being extracted by different relayers, there will be different profit opportunities, and people will switch which relayer they talk to. So it's kind of hard to measure it. It's always a kind of estimation here. But the fact that it seems to have topped out between 70 and 75% on even the shorter and longer term time frames, which is really, really cool. And you can even sort by the last 5 minutes, and you see how it drops to 65%. But that's very much noise because it's not enough data to draw any conclusion from. And as you go to 1 hour, it's still 70%. So I think 70-75% is where we've topped out at. Obviously, horrible. We don't want to be seeing anything. The ideal world is 0%, but when you look at the distribution here, most of it's coming from Flashbots. So the hilarious thing is that if all the censoring relayers were to turn off tomorrow, Flashbots, Eden Network, and Block Native, right, all the validators would go straight to the uncensoring ones, and we'd be at pretty much 0% censorship. That's how easy this problem is to fix. And I say easy because, it seems easy on the surface, just shut down the relayers, but obviously it's much more complex than that. And someone could just spin up another censoring relayer, and that could get usage, and we could be back to square one. So shutting down the relay has always been a band-aid solution, whereas fixing the root cause of the issue through things like PBS and CR lists and other such things have been the way to kind of permanently fix it, or at least fix it for the very long term instead of a band-aid fix. But cool to see Mevwatch.info updated with this leaderboard. I think it's very valuable. All right, some big news out of the Gitcoin ecosystem today. So they've said, you witnessed the global impact of our quadratic funds rounds in the past. Many global institutions have taken note. So we're excited to announce our first ever quadratic funding round on our new grants protocol in collaboration with UNICEF's Office of Innovation. So Gitcoin is going out of crypto. Like, they're doing stuff that's not just in crypto. They're not just doing Gitcoin grants rounds anymore as quadratic funding. They're also doing stuff with UNICEF, which is absolutely awesome to see, because public goods and funding public goods initiatives isn't just exclusive to Ethereum or crypto. It obviously applies to the rest of the world as well. And that's what Gitcoin's trying to do with their new grants protocol, is allow other institutions and non-crypto institutions to get involved and run their own quadratic funds matching rounds in order to raise money and fund public goods in the real world, whether that be doing stuff with UNICEF or any other organization. So very, very cool to see this news out of Gitcoin today. There is a blog post or a full announcement post here linked in the tweet, which I'll link in the YouTube description. You can go check that out for yourself. All right, so Pseudotheos has put together a great thread today where he starts off by saying, Ethereum's EVM has won the war of the smart contract platforms, and it's not even close. So how do we scale the EVM for the next billion users? Here's all you need to know about the zkEVM thesis. And there's a short little thread here with I guess like an explanation on the zkEVM thesis here, and then he links to the zk teams that are working on these things and zkEVMs to follow, of course, all the ones that I've spoken about on the Refuel many times. But I really like this little thread because it's just a really great way to quickly explain, the power of zkEVMs. But really at the heart of zkEVM and the optimistic rollups that are EVM and all the EVM forks is the fact that the EVM's dominance just keeps going up. It doesn't matter if it's technologically inferior to other solutions. It doesn't matter if people hate it because of that. They still have to use it. They still have to integrate with it. They still have to accept that it exists and it's growing, because that's where the development is. That's where the money is. That's where the growth is. And I think that zkEVMs are just going to keep catapulting that growth to new heights. Obviously, Arbitrum and Optimism are helping a lot with it too, given that they're both EVM compatible and equivalent systems. So I think that when you think about it like that, the EVM is going to be the winner, just like JavaScript was the winner. I should say like Solidity and the EVM, just like JavaScript was the winner in Web 2, even though it was inferior, even though people didn't like it. And I've explained this before, so I won't rehash it again, but I think it's always worth reminding people that out of all the ecosystems in crypto, the EVM dominates completely. I think the only non-EVM chain that sees any real usage is Solana, and even their usage has completely died in the bear market as well. And it seems like a lot of Solana projects are actually moving over to EVM systems such as the Polygon POS chain. And probably even layer 2s. I'm sure we'll see many announcements as well. So when you look at it like that, the EVM is going to remain dominant for a long time to come, I believe. All right, so speaking of zkEVM, Sandeep from Polygon shared some stats of Polygon zkEVM testnet. So more than 10,000 proofs have already been produced without downtime, total transactions over 14,000, address count almost 6,000, contract count about 1,500, ERC20s deployed 182, ERC721s, which are NFTs, about 59, and 1,622 self-deployed and proven smart contracts with full EVM equivalents. And then Sandeep says, steady lads, we're getting there. So it seems like the zkEVM testnet from Polygon is making some very good progress here. They're getting developers building on there. They're getting some curious users building on it. as well, or using it, I should say, as well, which is very cool to see. And I mean, the age of zkEVM will probably be not just, I guess, a 12, 24 month period. It's going to be like a 5-year journey. But I think in the next 12, 18, 24 months, we're going to see a lot of movement on the zkEVM front. All the test nets are going to be live. There's going to be some mainnets live. They're probably going to be in beta for quite a while. I wouldn't call them full production ready mainnets. Definitely going to be in beta for a while. I mean, Arbitrum and Optimism have been in beta since they launched, and it's been about 18 months since they've launched. So definitely be in beta for quite a while, but that doesn't mean that they can't grow, they can't form ecosystems, and we're going to see which ones actually perform and which ones actually will be able to grow as an ecosystem. And it's kind of hard to say right now, but there are some bets you could be making, and I'm not going to give my opinions on this because I don't want people trading on this or thinking I'm biased to any one team. Obviously, I do have my own biases, given I'm more involved in some teams than others. But I think that if you look at the whole zkEVM suite right now, you can probably pick any one of them and say that they have a decent chance of being one of the winners. Now, I've said before that I don't think every zkEVM is going to win, and by that I mean win in terms of like adoption. I'm not talking about the thing actually working, because that's easy to do relative to adoption, right? So when it comes to adoption, ecosystem growth, users, developers, all that good stuff, there's only going to be a handful, and this goes for all L2s, I believe. But that doesn't mean there can't be lots and lots of L2s, which may not be the most dominant, but are still very valuable. Like I've talked about the app chain thesis for L2s before. I think that's going to be very valuable and there's going to be certain apps that accrue a lot of value there if they become like an app chain L2 on Ethereum. But in terms of these generalized ecosystems, I think there's only going to be a small handful of big winners and maybe a long tail of smaller winners. But the smaller winners will end up over the long term just not surviving. They won't be very sustainable, so they'll probably shut down. And then the bigger winners will obviously keep growing and growing from there. But as I said, that's just for the generalized ecosystems. In terms of the app-specific ecosystems, I think there is definitely a very good chance that we see lots and lots of those. We could potentially see hundreds, if not thousands of those things blossom and have value for a very, I guess, like segmented and a very siloed ecosystem, but still have value there. And then obviously people can bridge in and out of that to these other L2s, to these generalized things. But it's hard to say right now. I am bullish on both approaches, but as I said, like there's not going to be like a ton of winners in the generalized space, but there probably will be a big amount of winners on a relative basis in the app chain in the app chain kind of space there. All right, so speaking of L2s, Bartek from L2 Beat put out a great tweet thread today saying, so it seems like a while ago Arbitrum has updated its rollup implementation on layer 1 in a way that dramatically increased its decentralization. Funny, they kind of forgot to inform the public about it. Let's have a quick look. And what he's talking about is the ability for, after the 7-day a period where a validator does not submit new state roots at all in a 7-day period, anyone can become a validator on the Arbitrum chain by calling the remove whitelist after validator AFK method on the rollup, and it's permissionless. This is really, really cool because, yes, if no one submits a proof to L1 Ethereum for 7 days. Not a proof. What did he say here? I've lost the word right now. A new state root. Sorry, not a proof. In a 7-day period, obviously that's really shitty and not great. It means that potentially things could get reversed because they're not hard confirmed on Ethereum. But after those 7 days, anyone can become a validator, and I'm sure someone would step in to do this and someone would be watching this, which is really, really cool. And as Bartek said, this makes Arbitrum a lot more decentralized. So kudos to them for doing this. I'm hoping to see this across the whole L2 ecosystem, right? I'm hoping to see Optimism do something similar to this, but this is really great, and it definitely was a little bit buried here. I mean, Gizion from Arbitrum here said that they opened an issue on, I believe, the L2 Beat repo, but I think Bartek missed it. But yeah, definitely really cool news here. I'll link this thread in the YouTube description for you to go check out. All right, just a shout out here to Taiko. They have put together a full video, a technical explainer of Taiko protocol given by Daniel. This is a great way to understand the different protocol participants and how the Ethereum equivalent ZK rollup runs. And then Daniel replied saying, the talk isn't necessarily well prepared. It's meant to be an internal tech talk, but I'm glad people may learn more about Taiko by watching it. So don't expect this to be anything formal. It's definitely more of a kind of casual tech talk, a casual internal tech talk, but still it's great to see that Taiko has spun up a new YouTube channel. A lot of education, I'm sure, will come out of this, so definitely go subscribe to them so that you can learn all about Taiko and ZK rollups, zkEVMs in general. All right, to finish off today's episode today, I did want to talk a little bit about a tweet that I put out today where I said people fall into the quote unquote, this time is different trap in both bull and bear markets. Best to keep this in mind as an investor. It will help you make clearer decisions when the time is right. Now, what I meant by this was basically that every time things get crazy in both markets, both bull and bear markets, people would tend to say this time is different. In the bull market, people were saying this time is different because they truly believe that we were going into a super cycle, right? They believed that we were going to go up only, that this was a new paradigm, that things were going to be amazing, that we were going mainstream, that mass adoption was just around the corner. And of course, none of that was true. And we all got humbled this year, obviously. But then the same is true in a bear market where people were like, well, interest rates are going up. The macro environment's really bad. There's an ongoing war right now. There's all this fallout from the Terra collapse, all the leverage fallout, all this other stuff happening around the ecosystem. So this time really is different in this bear market. But do you see how they sound the same as the bulls, right? I personally see that. I think it sounds very similar. Not to say that there's not merit to the points in both cases. I actually think that there's definitely merit to both sides of the coin here. But when you start hearing that as kind of like the consensus view, that's another one of those inputs that I take in that I spoke about at the beginning of the episode, where basically I look at that and I'm like, I'm feeling like the bears are getting real greedy right now, and they feel like the bulls at the top of the market. Now, bull and bear markets are definitely very different in that in a bull market, it's a different emotion, right? It's euphoria, it's greed. In a bear market, it's fear and apathy and things like that. But there is definitely a greed in a bear market and fear in a bull market. Towards the tail end of a bull market, the people in the know, the people that have more experience, will definitely become very fearful because they'll be like, this is crazy, right? This is like, what's going on right now? Everything's just pumping indiscriminately. There's so much money coming in. How is this sustainable? And the opposite in a bear market is true of people getting greedy, where bears start being like, oh, everything's going to zero, the world's going to blow up, if the Fed's going to keep raising rates, inflation's really high, I'm going to be able to buy like $100 ETH. It's the same thing. It's just different points. So as I said, that's one of the inputs that I take in. Obviously not investment advice, but just something to keep in mind generally when you're positioning yourself as a long-term investor. And I really want to emphasize that this is long-term, guys. This is not day-to-day, week-to-week, month-by-month, or even year-to-year. I'm talking, long-term. I have a decade, 2-decade, 3-decade time horizon, and that's the kind of stuff that I'm talking about. But in the typical crypto cycles or market cycles in general, they tend to happen every few years. That's the kind of way I look at it. So, for example, if you were to buy ETH today, I wouldn't expect a return on that investment for quite a while, honestly. And I could be completely wrong on that. I mean, I hope I am, obviously, but I wouldn't be expecting, oh, I'll just buy ETH today and then in like 6 months I'll sell it all and I'll be rich, sort of thing. That's definitely not going to happen. And I think always staying grounded and keeping your head screwed on is the best way to avoid falling into these traps. But on that note, I'm going to end it there for today. So thank you everyone for listening and watching. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. Give the video a thumbs up, subscribe to the newsletter, join the Discord channel, and I'll catch you all tomorrow. Thanks everyone.